Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's certainly the case that you can see lots of evidence that this president deserves to be impeached. But since I'm not in Congress, I'm focused on replacing him the old-fashioned way.
I think there should be a conversation about impeachment right now.
No. I think right now we should continue this investigation.
I believe that there is room for that conversation, but right now what I want Mueller to come before Congress to testify.
I think we can solve this once and for all in November of 2020.
The release of the redacted Mueller report has reignited conversations about the potential impeachment of Donald Trump. Democratic leaders in the House have largely sided against pursuing now. And other than candidates Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro, the rest of the Democratic field is still playing it safe. Dean, Jennifer, and Karine are back with me. And Dean, you wanted to make a point about what Mueller seemed to have wanted done here.
And quickly, by the way, a recent poll shows 70% of Democrats want an impeachment of Donald Trump. So if you're running for the Democratic nomination, don't discount the will and interest of 70% of our base. The very last line of the Mueller report before the summary, which was a paragraph, the very last line said the protection of the criminal justice system from corrupt acts by any person, including the president, accords with the fundamental principle of government that no person in this country is so high that he is above the law. This was Robert Mueller's last line in a huge report before the paragraph summary. No person in this country is above the law. Robert Mueller is begging Congress to do the right thing. And they must. That is their responsibility under Article 1 of the Constitution. And yes, it's equal branches of government, but guess what? Only one branch could remove someone.
Right.
And that is Congress, because the framers understood Congress, Article 1, was the most important branch. So Article 1, and if a Democrat does not want to do their job under Article 1, I beg you to resign. Let another Democrat get in there who will do the job the American people want, which is holding a president accountable for crimes, a litany of crimes in the Robert Mueller report.
And just what's in the report, Jennifer Rubin, at minimum, what Robert Mueller was able to show is that this is a president who encouraged people to obstruct the investigation, that he himself on multiple occasions obstructed it. And per Mueller, the only reason that he's not being charged with witness tampering and obstruction of justice like any other American would, like you or I would, is because he's president. And staying president is his only protection from prosecution. Back in 1999, the Republicans who believed that Bill Clinton had so obstructed justice by not admitting to his sexual affair that he needed to go included Chuck Grassley, Pat Roberts, Mike Crapo, Roy Blunt, Richard, Jerry Moran, Rob Portman, Lindsey Graham. They were among those who said that the conduct of the President of the United States in having a sexual affair and lying about it were so bad that the constitutional remedy must be applied. They didn't want more hearings. They didn't want more investigation. They wanted him gone because of a sexual affair. Yes. How can the Congress of the United States, and I include Republicans in this, ever impeach another president in history if they don't apply that standard now?
This is the difficulty, and I think you're exactly right. To not act is also acting. To not go forward is to say we've now so lowered the bar for the commander-in-chief, for the chief of the executive, branch of government, that we essentially have accepted what is completely unacceptable. And I think for those Democrats who are running, I think it is important for them to not to say that I'm not in Congress, it's somebody else's job, but to call for Mueller, to call for the proper hearings followed by impeachment hearings, and then see where the evidence takes them and where the American people take them. And I would say this. I think they're underestimating the American people. They are assuming that the American people will just kind of roll their eyes, nothing new here. And I don't think that's the case. I think seeing this report in one place, compiling all of this evidence of lying, of obstruction, plus welcoming with open arms, trying to get the elusive 30,000 emails, which really didn't exist, ordering people to do things that if they had carried them out certainly would have been crimes. All of this collectively, I think the American people are able to digest this. They're able to take this in. And I think that public opinion will coalesce in the right place. And we've seen again, sometimes politicians are followers rather than leaders. But I think they should talk to their constituents. I think they should absolutely have Mueller come forward, as Kamala Harris said. But at that point, I think they've got to begin to do their job. And I think it would be a mistake for them to say, well, the American people will be mad at us, or the American people won't like it, or will be divided. You know what? We're always going to be divided because he's created a cult-like atmosphere where 25, 30% of the American people, whatever it is, are completely brain dead. So we're never going to have complete consensus. That's not our problem collectively. That's a problem for the president and for that select group who has kind of left Earth One and now is operating in a different space. The rest of us, 70% of the American people, cannot be held hostage to 25, 30% of the cultists who will never listen to anything.
And to Karine Jean-Pierre, for Democrats now, I mean, Democrats keep making these political calculations, including that it wouldn't succeed in the Senate. Note that no impeachment has ever succeeded in the Senate. Andrew Johnson survived it. Bill Clinton survived it. So that doesn't sound like a valid reason not to do it. It was done before. But are Democrats right or wrong, in your view, in worrying about the 2020 electoral consequences of potentially impeaching Donald Trump?
Here's the way I see it, Joy. It should not be about politics. It should be about the rule of law. It should be about protecting our democracy. It should be to do their job, their constitutional duty, period. Look, Trump obstructed justice, and it worked. I mean, the Mueller report lays out a staggering abuse of power. I mean, just unbelievable. You read the 448 pages once and you're like, oh, wow. And then you read the 448 pages again and you're like, oh, damn, this is really, really bad. And so we cannot be stuck in the politics of this. We cannot. We have to move forward and hold this president accountable. And it's just, this is not the precedent that we should be setting, is that the president of the United States is above the law. And that's not who we should be as a nation. What will happen the next time? What will happen? And here's the thing. Democrats, if they do this right, you know, that term that everybody uses, they can walk and chew gum and get this done. They could talk about the issues. They could talk about the things that American public wants to hear about, what the party, the base of the party wants to hear, and do their constitutional duty. It is not a hard thing to do. And so it just baffles my mind that they are not being leaders on this. They need to act. I think the Mueller report, at the end of the day, when you look at it in its totality, Mueller was saying Congress needs to act. Congress needs to take the next step. And like we've been saying, there are historical precedents for this, right? One of the articles of impeachment was obstruction of justice. Bill Clinton was impeached because of obstruction of justice. This is nothing new here. We're just asking them to do their job.
And Nixon was an unindicted co-conspirator in a crime, and Donald Trump happens to be, an unindicted, right, co-conspirator in the Michael Cohen case. And we have two lawyers here on the, people may not realize that Jennifer and Dean are both lawyers. And a quick yes or no question, Dean, would any ordinary citizen get away with the kind of obstruction that Donald Trump has practiced and not be indicted?
You're in a holding cell right now. If you're anybody else waiting for the hearing before a judge to have bail set for you, and let's be honest,
there are a lot of ordinary citizens in America sitting in jail in Rikers and places right now.
It is Monday, the 22nd of April of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. That's right, folks. It's not only been a weekend, it's been a holiday weekend. Yes, we hearken in the spring. Every Easter, it is the story of renewal. Of course, there's a lot of death ahead of that. And speaking of which, Game of Thrones is back on, and I tell everybody everything I know about Game of Thrones I've learned on Twitter. That's the go-to place. It's better than any Cliff Notes. It really is. Hey, how was your weekend? Did you have a good Passover and Easter and a 420? It was the Holy Trinity of Holy Trinities. Yes, indeed. It's a rarity on the lunar calendar, so I hope you took advantage of it. And if you didn't, it's still time, because today is not only Earth Day, it's Easter Monday, too. Wow. Well, it's great to have a Earth Day in this time of renewal, so I hope that we do. All right. Of course, with all of the renewal stories, of course, there's lots of death, too. We're going to be talking about the bombings in Sri Lanka. Horrendous. My God. We'll also be looking at who Trump considers to be his, ideal lawyer, and how that fellow fares in history. And quite a few other things, including what was up top there. Breakdown of the Mueller Report. And inquiring minds do want to know, if Trump is not impeachable, well, who the hell is? Jeez. And you got Cornyn out there today blaming Obama for not doing enough. Not mentioning once, and this is what I don't get. Cornyn is quoting a statement, article written by the spokesperson, or some, I don't think it was chief of staff, but written by some mucky muck of Mitch McConnell. See, these Republicans, Trump, they all think that all of America is as stupid as all the people that vote for them. They're going to have a sad thing coming. All they can do is suppress the vote. And they have been doing that rather effectively. And, messing around with it. So on the issues, yeah, I could see where part of our side could be correct. Well, we'll take care of Trump the old-fashioned way. It's a ballot box. Yeah, except for one thing. It's not a ballot box. It's a computer software programmed machine that has been hacked and continues to be now. The Republicans continue to vote down bills for election box, voter box security, and foreign hostile governments or hostile foreign governments hacking into our electoral systems to muck it up because they believe it will be in their benefit, they being the Republicans. And they might be right. So, we've got our work cut out for us, don't we? We have a whole party that has been arrayed against us for decades. And now they've teamed up with some hostile foreign powers, and it's not just Vlad. Nope. But you know what? The sleeping giant is rousing, and the other side better take care. You don't want to rouse the sleeping giant. And I gotta say, it will be the sleeping giant rousing from its slumber and clomping around really before anything gets done. And let's hope that he has arisen come sooner than later. He? All right. What's on the rest of the menu today? Well, there's so much news out there. We had to, of course, put ourselves in a bubble so that we could curate a show for you today. Republicans across the country are pushing back against vaccine bills because anything the Democrats want must be bad, including vaccinating the community against deadly diseases. I suppose if the Republicans are awash in laundered Russian rubles, they might have a motivation for opposing vaccine bills. They might. A Washington GOP state representative discussed committing violent attacks and surveillance on his political enemies with right-wing extremists who were more than happy to help him out. And Trump's ideal lawyer was such a vile figure in U.S. politics that the name Roy Cohn lives in infamy. Yeah, I think it's more than infamy, but I like the sound of it. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Trump prepares an end to the Iran sanctions waivers, which of course will trigger oil price spikes. And Sri Lanka has lifted its curfew after bomb attacks killed 290 and wounded over 500. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link at the right-ish of the page. Go ahead, look, it's right there, and it's monitored by Kelly Lincoln. If you have any questions or concerns, you can engage there. And, of course, we're on social media, so, do what you have to do. But check out the chat room link. If you would then look to the leftish of at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, from that chat room link, you will then notice the contribute button. And all kidding aside, we are in a savings mode to acquire funds in which to buy new machines, and I put the emphasis on the plural. And 8 years of continuous broadcasting does have wear and tear indeed, and we are celebrating 8 years of continuous resistance radio. Did you know that in the midst of that, I had a shoulder surgery, and the day I came back from shoulder surgery, I was right here. Well, not right here specifically, but when the mothership was down in Berkeley, I was right there carrying on. And we've had, of course, the weather, acts of God, which is like sometimes the cable company tells you, sorry, we have an outage right now. We don't know why. That's an act of God. But then there are greater acts of God, like the weather. Sometimes that has an impact too. But we've been here resisting as the founders originally intended, and it's our moral duty to do so. And thank you for helping us do that, because what comes out of our wallets really is what sustains this. But it's not just what comes out of our wallets. It's you too, because you are our biggest contributor. We don't have the cliche George Soros money. We don't have Tom Steyer money. Okay? But we do have great listeners and fans over all these years that help us along the way, pay our bills, and those bills keep increasing, and yes, we have to buy new machines. Damn. So, thank you for your generosity in helping us resist, and it's needed even more now. And I should remind folks what our primary directive is. Being, travelers of stardust, what is our prime directive? Well, it's to elect more and better Democrats. I know it sounds so material and reductionist, but hey, how is love going to survive? Really? Really? All right. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so by going to the Twitter handle at Netroots Radio. How simple is that? Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime and get those links out on social media as quickly as I can. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, and they're all out there. All of them. Okay, well, it was an Easter weekend. I had a pleasant dinner at my sister's house. My mom was feeling a bit under the weather, so we brought her some food back. She just kind of, that time of day, she gets a little worn out anyway, and she's been working like a demon even before the Easter weekend, just because that's what she does. And like a demon? No. Well, like a demon almost. And but it wore her out a little bit, and so she didn't go, but we had a very quiet and pleasant Easter dinner. And one of the nieces, a young one, had a birthday, so she got her little birthday presents. I didn't see an egg hunt. Because there was only the two nieces. They must have done something with a lot of kids earlier in the day, and I know that they were in a parade the day before on Saturday. So it was quite fun and pleasant. I did not allow myself to fall into the morass of moroseness, dwelling on, like, oh, wow, another holiday that I'm not spending with my son after 41 years. So I'm finding that it's too easy to fall into that. And it doesn't really benefit. It reduces. So I'm trying to reconcile everything. It's tough. I would never wish this on anybody, even Trump. I mean, I wouldn't. It's just, well, that's what makes us different. When I say, like, Democrats that hope for love in the universe, yeah, it's not just us, but is the other side really motivated by love of neighbor? Yeah, a kind of love. A love of self is not really quite what I consider to be the capital L love. Call me a romantic. But still, what are people's motivations? Are they selfish, or are they magnanimous? And I think, by and large, the Democratic Party is one that wants to promote neighborliness. I don't know what's so wrong with that. I really don't. Okay, well, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays, too. In the culinary industry, Mondays are, you don't have a delivery. You don't have a delivery that day. I mean, you're really, what you have left from the weekend, and you put it together, and some people put it together, and other people are able to attain something of a, I don't know, a higher experience, and that's what we try to do. Chop it up, dice it up, put it together, and it's gourmet. Indeed. This first offering is out of Think Progress by Amanda Michelle Gomez. In response to Washington State's worst measles outbreak in more than 2 decades, 74 people have been affected so far, the state legislature moved to pass legislation to make it harder for parents to opt out of vaccinating their kids. The bill ultimately passed on Wednesday, but every Republican in the state Senate voted against it. Every single Republican. And Joan McCarter brought that up on David's show last Wednesday, by the way. Amid a nationwide measles outbreak, Republicans in Washington and other states across the country are opposing efforts to do something about the public health crisis. And you know what they're doing? They're citing civil liberties and espousing anti-vaccine views to do it. This year, 555 people have come down with measles, the second highest number of reported cases in 25 years. Now, let me think of this timeline. What's been going on for the last 25 years outside of the Federalist Society, legislative bills written in a box for GOP operatives to be able to pass, the Koch brothers, the Petersons, Cambridge Analytica, Vladimir Putin. Kind of makes you wonder. I keep saying property is more valuable to hostile foreign oligarchs when they're delivered vacant. And what better way to vacate them than have everybody die of measles? So in order to protect everyone from measles, including infants and people who just can't take the measles vaccine for medical reasons, a large percentage of the population needs to be vaccinated, a threshold known as herd immunity. A 5% vaccination opt-out rate could threaten the herd immunity. Now, the civil liberties aspect that they're arguing for, they being these anti-vaxxers, the Republicans, whatever, right, is that it's not that they're anti-vaccine, they're just anti-anyone telling them what to do, what's best for their kids. So I want to know, at what part does having a measles outbreak in which you have old people, young people dying, literally dying from the measles, how is that in the best interest of your kid? If people are dying around you, it might come to you too. Jason Williams of The Guardian, that's right, the UK Guardian, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Oh, Washington State. A lot of stuff coming out of Washington State. The measles, I don't know, an epidemic of right-wing extremism. Crazy. Well, a Republican politician took part in private discussions with right-wing figures about carrying out surveillance, psyops, and even violent attacks on his perceived political enemies, according to chat records obtained by The Guardian. State Representative Matt Shea, who represents Spokane Valley in the Washington State House, participated in the chats with 3 other men. That's great. And then they go on to name these fellows, which I'm not going to do. You can look at the article. Jeez, these people. Let's see. The chats on the messaging app Signal took place in the days leading up to a supposed Antifa revolt. On 4 November 2017, through late October, far-right media outlets had been stoking fears of political conflict on the basis of planned peaceful protests by a small leftist group. And this happens quite occasionally here in the Northwest. Right-wing extremists will identify an Antifa, or anybody who's anti-fascist is considered Antifa up here, which is really rough because there's a lot of people in the veterans halls here when they go to their barbecues who fought the fascists. I mean, there's still some still alive. They can't say anything very much. They're pretty old. But so once again, these small leftist groups will be identified by these right-wing extremists. The cops, who for some reason, I can't figure it out, have pretty much sided with the right-wing extremists. Oh my God. To the point of having tattoos of identification for their group. And then they go and beat up the leftist march and then say how violent Antifa is, and they were just trying to make America great again, and the only way to make America great again is to kick the ass of anybody that disagrees with you. And they do, with a lot of cop help. Of course we're going to go over into our break. We're a salon, and one that's modeled on the French model, after all, and they're never on time. Alex Anderson of Alternet brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump has not been shy about expressing his admiration for his attorney and political fixer Roy Cohn, who was aged 59 when he died of AIDS-related causes in 1986, and went down in history as one of the vilest 20th century figures in U.S. politics. Trump considers Cohn a mentor and an inspiration, and he may have found his 2019 version of Cohn in Attorney General William Barr. Cohn was a top fixer in business and right-wing politics in his day. Oh, wait a second. Business? That's a polite way of saying he worked for the mob. I mean, it wasn't personal when people died. It was business. It was mob business. Let's be clear. And mob business and right-wing politics seem to have been going hand in hand for a very long time. Barr served as a fixer for Trump when he offered a vigorous defense of Trump during a morning press conference on Thursday, the day Barr officially released a redacted version of the final report for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Now, Cohn, born in New York City in 1927, achieved infamy as Senator Joseph McCarthy's chief counsel during the Red Scare in the early 50s. McCarthy, a Wisconsin Republican, conducted a ruthless anti-communist witch hunt, and he did so with Cohn's help and guidance. Enthusiastically encouraged by Cohn, McCarthy believed in a guilty until proven innocent approach when it came to alleged communist connections in the government. Cohn was also a key figure in the Lavender Scare, an anti-gay campaign in the 1950s. Gays, according to Cohn, posed a security threat because they were susceptible to blackmail, and Cohn, along with McCarthy and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, were responsible for the mass firings of gays from the U.S. government during the 50s. Although Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower would be way too moderate for the Republican Party of 2019, he caved into the anti-gay hysteria, and in 1953 signed into law Executive Order 10450, which barred gays from working in the federal government. Now, despite his anti-gay activities, Cohn was widely believed to be a closeted gay man. Indeed, he did. And more than believed. Let's just be clear about this. In 1988, Life magazine article by Nicholas von Hoffman quoted Robert Blecker, who had ghostwritten one of Cohn's books, as saying when he was dying of AIDS-related causes, Cohn claimed to have liver cancer, not AIDS. Von Hoffman's article quotes Blecker as saying he was among the few people with whom Cohn had been open about being gay. After McCarthy faced a major backlash during the 50s, Cohn's legal and political career should have ended, but in the 70s, Cohn found a protege, a young real estate developer from Queens named Donald J. Trump. Cohn represented Trump when, in 1973, the U.S. Justice Department accused him of violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968 in 39 of his buildings by showing racial bias, and the attorney filed a $100 million countersuit against the federal government, calling the accusations against Trump irresponsible and baseless. Except it wasn't. He paid the fine. Longtime Trump ally Roger Stone has articulated how influential Cohn was in Trump's life. Stone, in a 2018 interview, explained, "You don't fight on the other guy's ground. You define what the debate is going to be about. I think Donald learned that from Roy. I learned that from Roy." Okay. Cohn's life is the subject of director Matt Treinauer's documentary, Where's My Roy Cohn? Trump has used the title's exact words. In 2017, after Mueller took over the Russia investigation, frustrated Trump remarked, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" Wah. Cohn is mentioned more than once in Mueller's final report for the Russia investigation. White House counsel Don McGahn reportedly faced Trump's wrath when Attorney General Jeff Sessions had recused himself from the investigation. Mueller's report says that Trump brought up Roy Cohn, stating that he wished Cohn was his attorney. McGahn interpreted the comment as directed at him, suggesting that Cohn would fight for Trump, whereas McGahn would not. And former White House Press Secretary Reince Priebus recalled that when Trump talked about Cohn, he said Cohn would win cases for him that had no chance, and that Cohn had done incredible things for him. You mean like send some leg breakers? Cohn would do that. He did. In one of the most amusing parts of Mueller's report, the special counsel describes a meeting in which Trump wanted to know why McGahn was taking notes, saying, "I never had a lawyer who took notes." McGahn, according to Mueller's report, said he kept notes because he was a real lawyer, and added that notes create a record and are not a bad thing. Of course, Cohn didn't want a record of anything because what he did was bad. And that's the experience that Trump had. That's the idea of lawyering in Trump's mind. Trump told McGahn, "I've had a lot of great lawyers like Roy Cohn. He did not take notes." Yeah, but I bet he had tapes. Trump and Cohn enjoyed so close a relationship that in 1980, Trump commented that Cohn had been vicious to others in his protection of me. To be sure, the word vicious describes Cohn. Now, at age 72, Trump still considers Cohn his mentor, and that is nothing to be proud of. All right, well, one little tidbit at the end there. When Cohn was said to be dying of AIDS, Trump really didn't want anything to do with him. Okay? And that's the way he treats people. Let's get to our break now, as late as it is here, and when we come back from the break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, I only have 2 minutes to tell you why. I know that Robin Bissell, European-American director of The Best of Enemies, wants this movie to be a reconciliation film. It's the true story of black activist Ann Atwater in early 1970s Durham, North Carolina, becoming friends with C.P. Ellis, the Durham Ku Klux Klan head. And I know Bissell wants so desperately to use this story to speak to today's racial divides that have risen like a sleeping giant. I know, but I only have 2 minutes to tell you why. I know we expect it's a story about both of them, but the movie prioritizes the perspective and thus the struggles of Ellis over Atwater. I know the first quarter of the movie bounces back and forth, Ellis and Atwater in parallel scenes, but all of Ellis' scenes feel longer and seek to humanize him. Not so with Atwater. We learn Ellis cares about his community and his family. We learn that Atwater is mean, tough, and angry. I mean, I could go scene by scene, but I only have 2 minutes to tell you why. So the first half of the movie invites us to counter our assumptions about Ellis, but swerves dangerously close to making Atwater the stereotype of the angry black woman. And since the first half of the movie doesn't go into detail about what the Klan specifically believes and how their handshake collusion with local white businesses and local white government has disenfranchised Durham's black community for generations, we have no emotional connection as to why Atwater and her people are so angry, and thus no basis for empathy with her. To make it worse, scene after scene with Ellis invites us into his inner world. We see him pause and think and consider. We see Atwater lash out and react. It's not until halfway through the movie that we get a moment of Atwater's self-reflection, and a camera pan reveals Ellis watching her, turning it into yet another moment on his journey. And that was the last straw. That's why I walked out. I know. I'm sorry. I'm going off on a movie I only saw a little more than half of. So go, see it, tell me I'm wrong, catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube. This has been Take Two Movie Review, and I'm sorry. I just couldn't take it.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Steve Mirsky. A year ago, I reported on a study about an increase in fatal traffic accidents on April 20th, 420, a date considered somewhat of a holiday by marijuana aficionados. That study was in the journal JAMA Internal Medicine, and it used data from the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The researchers looked at fatal accidents on 420 between 4:20 p.m. and 11:59 p.m. from 1992 to 2016, and they compared that date's data with the day 1 week before and 1 week after. They found a 12% increase in the relative risk of a fatal traffic accident after 4:20 p.m. on 420. 4:20 p.m. being the time that a lot of pot smokers like to light up on 420. The paper caught the attention of McGill University epidemiologists Sam Harper and Adam Palayu.
I should say, at first, I thought the paper was intriguing.
Sam Harper on the phone from Montreal.
I think the most fundamental difficulty with the JAMA paper was really the large magnitude of the effect size, given what we already know about impaired driving. So in order to increase the national rate of fatal accidents by something like 12% would require either a really large segment, as much as 15% of the population to be driving while high after 4:20 p.m. on 420, or really, really incredibly high relative risks of driving after the kind of cannabis consumption that you might have had on 420. So I think this was actually a hard case to make substantively.
Harper and Palayu decided to dig deeper.
So one way to test this is to see whether this kind of elevated risk persists if you compare 420 not just to the same day 1 week before and after, but, for example, to the same day 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, or to every other day of the year. And that's part of what we did. And when we did these sort of additional tests, we found very little evidence of any elevated risk on 420. And then the last thing we did was we also looked at this question of whether certain days showed, persistently high risks year after year. I mean, I think that's another way of trying to assess whether or not something is really robust. So again, when we did this, we found very little evidence that there was any kind of sustained effect of 420, not even for recent years where this has become a more popular event. But, other very well-established holidays like July the 4th, weekends around Thanksgiving and Labor Day, these things show very reliable excess risks of fatal crashes basically every year since the data started being collected in 1975.
Harper is careful to say they were not debunking the original research.
That's not the way I see it. I see it as like, okay, these guys had an interesting idea. And now what we did was like poke a little more deeply, look at it a little bit more carefully, and, maybe we find it's not so robust. And that's kind of interesting. I think that's the way the process should work, I hope.
For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Steve Mirsky.
Sweetie, want some fruit?
You have to use the right tool for the job. A power drill is the wrong tool to slice fruit. Just like an antibiotic is the wrong tool to treat viruses, including colds and flu. Antibiotics are only needed for certain bacterial infections. When they aren't needed, antibiotics won't help you, and the side effects could still hurt you. Ask your healthcare professional when an antibiotic is the right tool and when it's not. Visit cdc.gov/antibiotic-use.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
No more immigrants, no more refugees. The country is full, says Donald Trump. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. But not according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which has announced that the country needs more immigrant workers and wants to issue more H-2B visas for temporary jobs in the United States. For immigrants, jobs in housekeeping and landscaping in restaurants, hotels, and amusement parks, including workers from Mexico and Guatemala, as well as Jamaica and South Africa.
Some of us are illegal, and some are not wanted. Our work contracts out, and we have to move.
As a senior immigration analyst at the Cato Institute said, on one hand, we need more people because the country's economy is booming, and on the other hand, we say the country is full, go back. It's impossible to reconcile those positions. There is, of course, a larger point here beyond the issue of worker visas. And that is that immigrants are not the enemy of the country, as Trump insists, but rather the lifeblood of our nation and our democracy.
Adios, mis amigos, Jesus Maria. You won't have a name when you ride the big airplane, and all they will call you will be deportee.
This ACLU Minute is inspired by the enduring words of the songwriter Woody Guthrie and the voices of Arlo and Emmylou Harris.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day the labor movement lost one of its most poignant voices. Hazel Dickens was born in Mercer County, West Virginia in 1935. It was coal country. Hazel grew up knowing the life of a mining community. She was one of 11 children. Her brothers worked in the mines. One of her sisters worked cleaning the house of a mine supervisor. Her father was a Baptist preacher with a booming singing voice. Hazel inherited her father's talent for song. In the 1960s, she broke into the male-dominated world of bluegrass with her singing partner, Alice Gerard. At the time, they were one of the few women acts on the bluegrass circuit. In the years that follow, Hazel struck out on her own as a solo act. Many of her original songs spoke about the coal mining life she knew growing up in Mercer County. She wrote Black Lung for her oldest brother, who died from the disease. Her songs became part of some of the most iconic labor films ever made. Her song, They'll Never Keep Us Down, was the anthem for the Oscar-winning documentary Harlan County, USA. Another song, Hills of Galilee, was the feature in the film Mattawan. Both films told the stories of coal mining strikes. Hazel often sang at union rallies and at benefits for miners and their families. Her obituary, published in the Washington Post, quoted music historian Charles Wolfe. He said her singing has not only that high, lonesome sound, but you can hear the pain and anguish and the anger in it. It is absolutely heartfelt and sincere.
United we stand, divided we fall. For every dime they give us, a battle must be fought. So working people, use your power, the key to liberty. Don't support that rich man's style of luxury.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees. We are expected to have a high of 78 degrees. Oh my. And overnight lows should be tonight in the mid-50s. Daytime highs tomorrow will be in the upper 70s to low 80s. Winds are currently out of the due west at a negligible 1 to 2 miles per hour, which they call light and variable. Will continue at that rate or clip and direction tonight, shifting tomorrow out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we do not have any rain in the offing except for about a week from tomorrow, where we're having a forecast now of about a quarter inch of rain, at least in the 2 days from a week from now. And there could be more rain after that. We'll see what the forecast is, but that's pretty far out. I still like minerals falling from the sky in liquid form on the garden. It's always good. Grass pollen is high. I have been sneezing, and I hope I don't sneeze during any of the rest of the show. Ouch. Air quality index is considered good at 21 parts per million. That daytime UV index is at high at and it's at 7. So it's getting up there now as the sun gets more up in the sky. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.1 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 76 and sunny. Paris is 78 and sunny. Rome is 69 and partly cloudy. And yes, they have power and electrical grid potential disruptions due to electrical activity in the sky, meaning thunderstorms and lightning. You can't have one without the other. Kiev is 62 and fair. Kabul is 68 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 65 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 71 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 66 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Leslie Rofton of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. The United States said it will eliminate in May all waivers granted to 8 economies, allowing them to buy Iranian oil without facing U.S. sanctions, as it ratcheted up pressure to chunk off all oil revenues of the Islamic Republic. Oh, wow. It's almost like he's trying to wag the dog and make the dog bite people. The decision taken by Donald Trump has sent oil prices to their highest in 2019. Feature, not a bug. And even though the White House said the United States was working with top OPEC exporter Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to ensure the oil market is adequately supplied, the sanctions were imposed as Washington pressed Iran to curtail its nuke program and stop backing militant proxies across the Middle East like we do. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the religious zealot, reiterated that Washington's goal was to bring down exports of Iranian oil to zero so that the Saudis can have a corner on the market, and added that the U.S. had no plans to give any grace period beyond May 1st for countries to comply. Well, maybe he'll be under impeachment proceedings by then. Nah, that's only in a week or so. Oil prices spiked after Sunday reports that the waivers would end and remained higher today. The international benchmark Brent rose 2.6% to $73.87 a barrel, after earlier touching at $74.31. The U.S. reimposed sanctions in November on exports of Iranian oil after Trump unilaterally pulled out of the 2015 nuclear accord between Iran and 6 world powers last May because he's doing Vlad's bidding. Let's not forget, this was all part of the conspiracy, not collusion. Look at the report. In recent months, Saudi Arabia and other OPEC members have cut supply dramatically, as reported here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We've kicked that around. And why were they doing it? Cut the supply, increase demand, prices go up, don't they? While the kingdom is expected to boost output again, analysts fear that the U.S. move, along with sanctions on Venezuela's oil industry, will leave the world with inadequate spare capacity. And as I mentioned before, it is a feature, not a bug.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Well, we've had a bit of an update on this final amuse-bouche by Sanjeev Miglani out of Reuters since we started the show and read the outline of what we were going to attend today. Though Sri Lanka lifted this curfew, they have now invoked emergency powers in the aftermath of that devastating bomb attack on hotels and churches blamed on militants with foreign links, in which 290 people were killed and nearly 500 wounded. The emergency law, which gives police and the military extensive powers to detain and interrogate suspects without court orders, will go into effect at midnight tonight, the president's office said. Colombo, the seaside capital of the Indian Ocean island, was jittery today. Police said 87 bomb detonators were found at the city's main bus station while an explosive went off near a church where scores were killed on Sunday when bomb squad officials were trying to defuse it. A night curfew will go back into effect at 8 p.m., and there is no claim of responsibility for the attack, but suspicion was focusing on Islamist militants in the Buddhist majority country. Investigators said 7 suicide bombers took part in the attacks, while a government spokesman said an international network was involved. Now, police had received a tip-off of a possible attack on churches by a little-known domestic Islamist group some 10 days ago. And police said 24 people had been arrested, all of whom were Sri Lankan, but they gave no more details. And then there's more information on the particulars of the suicide attack. I won't go into that now because we're at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you know Networks Radio is going to broadcast on. We have so much live content going on today, as we always do. You can keep up on all the breaking news. So do that. We'll meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesday. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.